The rain came down in sheets, turning the Silver Creek courtyard into a battlefield of mud and blood. Lyanna Rivers stood at the shattered gates, her stiletto boots sinking into the Montana earth, and watched 300 wolves cower before a monster. Not her. Not yet. The monster was Rax, a rogue warlord built like a grizzly bear with a face carved from violence. He held a jagged knife to the throat of Alpha Darius Blackwood, Silver Creek's fallen king, forcing him to kneel in the filth while his pack watched in helpless horror. Lyanna tilted her head, rainwater streaming down the crimson streaks in her dark hair. Behind her, 3 black SUVs idled, their engines purring like predators. The scent of diesel and ozone mixed with the copper tang of spilled blood. She removed her sunglasses slowly, deliberately. When her eyes opened, they were no longer the soft amber of a wolf. They were molten gold, the pupils elongated into vertical slits that caught the dying light. A woman in the crowd gasped. Another whispered a prayer. Darius lifted his head, pain etched into every line of his face, and looked directly at her. For a moment, recognition flickered, then died. She was a stranger to him now, a ghost wearing the face of someone he had killed 5 years ago. From the SUV behind her, a small voice piped up. "Mommy, can we play now?" Lyanna smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Yes, baby, you can play." The passenger door opened and 3 children stepped into the rain. They wore matching black raincoats that made them look like tiny executioners. The oldest, a boy with gray eyes identical to Darius Blackwood's, cracked his knuckles. The middle child, quieter, stared at the crowd with eyes that glowed faint amber. The youngest, a girl with wild curls, grinned as smoke curled from her nostrils. Rax laughed, a wet, rasping sound. "Children? You brought children to a slaughter?" Lyanna took a step forward, her boots clicking against stone. "I brought reckoning. The children are just here for exercise." Rax's grin faltered. He tightened his grip on Darius. "One more step, and your precious Alpha dies." Lyanna stopped exactly 10 feet away. She looked at Darius with the clinical interest of someone examining roadkill. "He's not my Alpha. He's just the sperm donor." Darius flinched. The words struck deeper than Rax's blade ever could. The little girl stepped forward, shrugging off her raincoat. Beneath it, her hands began to glow with an eerie blue light. "Nobody threatens my daddy," she said sweetly. Then she opened her mouth, and fire erupted. The courtyard exploded into chaos. But that was 5 years from now, or rather, 5 years ago. Time is a funny thing when you die and come back as something new. Let me show you how we got here. Autumn in Montana arrived like a lover's promise, all golden leaves and cool whispers. The Silver Creek pack house sprawled across 10 acres of pristine wilderness, a monument to werewolf wealth and power. Lyanna had lived there for 3 years and still felt like an intruder. She was an Omega, the lowest rank, invisible, unless someone needed their floors scrubbed or their linens changed. On this particular morning, she was carrying a basket of freshly washed sheets through the servants' corridor when she heard the crying, small, hitching sobs that made her wolf whine in sympathy. Lyanna paused. She had exactly 12 minutes before the head housekeeper would notice her absence. 12 minutes before punishment. The crying came from the courtyard behind the kitchens. Lyanna pushed through the door and found a child huddled against the stone wall. 8 years old, maybe 9. Omega, like her. The girl's name was Renna, and she had bruises blooming on her arms like dark flowers. 3 boys stood over her, sons of pack warriors, enjoying their cruelty the way children enjoy breaking things that can't fight back. Lyanna should have walked away. Omegas who interfered in pack hierarchy faced consequences, but her feet carried her forward anyway, her body moving before her mind could catch up. "That's enough," she said quietly. The boys turned. The tallest sneered. "The maid's giving orders now?" Lyanna knelt beside Renna, gently helping the girl stand. The child's scent was terror and shame. Lyanna pulled a clean handkerchief from her apron and dabbed at the blood on Renna's split lip. "She's just a child," Lyanna said. "She doesn't deserve this." "She's Omega trash," the boy spat. "Like you." Footsteps. Heavy. Confident. Lyanna didn't need to turn to know who had arrived. The scent gave her away before the voice did. Jasmine and steel, the signature of beta blood. Vera Sterling stepped into the courtyard like a queen surveying her domain. She was beautiful in the way that marble statues are beautiful. Cold. Perfect. Untouchable. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her designer suit probably cost more than Lyanna made in 6 months. "Lyanna," Vera said, her voice dripping false sweetness, "did you just dare to correct my nephews?" Lyanna stood slowly, placing herself between Vera and the trembling child. "I was just helping Renna to the infirmary. She fell." Vera's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Is that so?" She looked at her nephews. "Did she fall, boys?" They grinned. "She fell," they chorused. Vera stepped closer until Lyanna could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "You forget your place, Omega. These boys are future warriors. That thing," she gestured dismissively at Renna, "is expendable, as are you." The slap came fast. Vera's palm connected with Lyanna's cheek, hard enough to snap her head sideways. Pain bloomed, hot and sharp. Lyanna's wolf snarled inside her, demanding retribution, but Lyanna didn't strike back. She couldn't. Omegas who raised a hand to higher ranks were exiled. Or worse. Instead, she tasted blood and stayed standing. Vera's eyes narrowed. "Next time you interfere, I'll have you whipped. Is that clear?" "Yes, Beta." Vera swept away, her nephews trailing like ducklings. When they were gone, Lyanna helped Renna to her feet. The girl's eyes were wide with something like worship. "Thank you," Renna whispered. Lyanna managed a smile despite the throbbing in her face. "Go to the infirmary. Tell them you fell down the stairs." After Renna left, Lyanna stood alone in the courtyard and let herself shake. Her wolf whimpered, confused by the pain, by the unfairness. But Lyanna understood something her animal half didn't. Kindness in a cruel place was rebellion. She just didn't know yet that rebellion would cost her everything. From the shadows near the east wing, Vera watched her leave. The blonde woman pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. "The Omega is becoming a problem. We need to accelerate the plan." The reply came instantly. "Agreed. I'll speak to the doctor." Vera smiled and deleted the conversation. The Autumn Moon Festival arrived with music and firelight. The entire pack gathered in the great meadow, tables laden with roasted meats and honey wine. Lyanna worked the event in a simple black dress, serving drinks and clearing plates while the pack celebrated. She had learned to make herself invisible. Eyes down, movements quiet, barely there, until she walked past him. Alpha Darius Blackwood stood near the bonfire, laughing with his warriors. He was 28 and built like violence, wrapped in expensive clothes, dark hair, gray eyes sharp enough to cut, and an aura that made even the strongest wolves bow their heads. Lyanna had served him 100 times. She knew he took his coffee black, that he preferred venison to beef, that he had a scar on his left hand from a silver blade. She knew everything about him except what his attention felt like. That changed when she stumbled. Her foot caught on a tree root hidden in the grass. The tray of wine glasses tilted, time slowing as momentum carried her forward. She was going to fall, going to shatter crystal and humiliate herself in front of the entire pack. Then hands caught her, strong hands that steadied her instantly, fingers warm against her bare arms. The scent hit her first. Cedar and steel, winter mornings and thunderstorms. It poured into her lungs like liquid fire, igniting something deep in her chest. Her wolf, usually so quiet, surged forward with a howl of recognition. Mate. The bond snapped into place with physical force. Lyanna felt it like a golden thread spearing from her heart straight into his, tying them together with a certainty that rewrote her entire existence in a single second. She looked up. Darius was staring at her like he'd been struck by lightning. His pupils had dilated, his breathing shallow. His fingers tightened on her arms, and she could feel the tremor in them. Mate, he whispered, the word barely audible over the music. Around them, the festival continued. No one noticed that the universe had just reshuffled itself. No one except them. Lyanna should have pulled away, should have run. Alphas didn't mate with Omegas. It was against pack law, against tradition, against every social rule that kept their world functioning. But the bond didn't care about rules. She started, then forgot how words worked. Darius's hand moved to her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. What's your name? Lyanna. Her voice sounded foreign. Lyanna Rivers. Lyanna, he repeated, like he was tasting it. How have I not noticed you before? Because I'm nothing, she wanted to say. Because I'm invisible. But the bond was singing between them, and lying felt impossible. I don't know, she whispered instead. From across the meadow, she saw Vera Sterling watching them. The beta's daughter's face had gone absolutely white. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand. Darius seemed to sense it too. He looked around, suddenly aware that they were still in public, that half the pack had noticed their alpha holding an Omega like she was made of starlight. He didn't let go. Come with me, he said, and it wasn't a command. It was a plea. They walked into the forest, following the moon path to a clearing Lyanna had never seen before. Darius didn't speak until they were alone, surrounded by pine trees and silence. Then he turned to her, and the moonlight caught in his eyes, turning them silver. I've waited my entire life for this, he said. For you. Lyanna's heart was a wild thing in her chest. I'm Omega. I don't care. The council will never approve. I don't care, he repeated, stepping closer. The moon goddess chose you for me. That's all that matters. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm. She could feel his pulse matching hers, beat for frantic beat. Lyanna Rivers, he said formally, will you accept me as your mate? She should have said no. should have protected them both from the storm that was coming. But standing there in the moonlight, feeling the bond wrap around them like silk, she couldn't. Yes, she breathed. Yes. Darius kissed her then, soft at first, reverent, like she was something precious. Then deeper, hunger breaking through his control. Lyanna had never been kissed before, but her body knew exactly what to do. She melted into him, hands fisting in his shirt, and let the bond pull them under. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darius pressed his forehead to hers. "I'll protect you," he promised. "No matter what comes. I swear it." Lyanna believed him. That was her first mistake. The weeks that followed were a fairy tale written in stolen moments and secret smiles. Darius publicly claimed her as his mate, and the pack had no choice but to accept it. The moon goddess's will was absolute. Vera stopped slapping her. The other Omegas looked at her with envy instead of pity. Lyanna moved from the servants' quarters to Luna's suite, a room so large she got lost in it. Darius taught her pack politics during breakfast, taught her to fight during afternoon training sessions, taught her what her body was capable of during long nights tangled in silk sheets, his mouth mapping every inch of her skin like he was memorizing scripture. "You're perfect," he would whisper against her throat, her collarbone, the curve of her breast. "Every part of you." Lyanna learned what it felt like to be seen, to matter. She also learned what it felt like to be watched. Elder Aldrich Thornwood attended every council meeting with eyes like a hawk. He was 70, built from leather and suspicion, and he looked at Lyanna like she was a disease infecting his precious pack. "An Omega Luna," he said during one particularly brutal session, "weakens us. Other packs will see it as vulnerability." Darius had slammed his fist on the table. "She is my fated mate. The goddess chose her." "The goddess makes mistakes," Aldrich replied coldly. Vera, sitting at her father's right hand, had smiled. But despite the politics, despite the whispers, Lyanna was happy. She ran with Darius under full moons, their wolves playing in the snow. She learned to help the pack healers, discovered she had a gift for herbs. She made friends with the children, including little Renna, who followed her like a shadow. Life was good. Then came the morning she couldn't keep her breakfast down. Lyanna stared at the toilet bowl, her stomach heaving, and felt the first flutter of hope. She and Darius had been careful, but the bond made their wolves desperate to reproduce. It was possible. It was more than possible. She made an appointment with the pack doctor for that afternoon. She never made it. The council meeting was supposed to be routine. Budget discussions, patrol schedules, nothing that required Lyanna's presence. But halfway through Elder Aldrich's report on border security, the room tilted sideways. Lyanna grabbed the edge of the table as blackness crept into her vision. She heard Darius shout her name, felt his arms catch her before she hit the floor. Then nothing. She woke in the medical wing with fluorescent lights burning her eyes. Dr. Corbin Hale stood over her, his face professionally neutral. He was 50-something, with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for excellence. Darius sat beside her bed, holding her hand like he could anchor her to consciousness through sheer will. "What happened?" Lyanna asked, her voice rough. Corbin glanced at Darius, then back to her. "I ran some tests while you were unconscious. Standard procedure for fainting episodes." Something in his tone made Lyanna's stomach clench. "And?" Corbin pulled up a chair, his movements deliberate. Alpha, Luna, I'm afraid I have difficult news. Darius's grip tightened. What is it? The doctor pulled out a tablet, showing them what looked like an ultrasound image. Grainy, black and white, meaningless to Lyanna's untrained eye. Your uterus, Corbin said gently, pointing to a shadowy area. Shows extensive scarring, likely from your first shift. It happens sometimes when wolves shift young, before their bodies are fully developed. The trauma can cause permanent damage. Lyanna's ears started ringing. What are you saying? Corbin met her eyes, and she saw pity there. Horrible, suffocating pity. I'm saying you're infertile, Luna. Your womb cannot support a pregnancy. I'm sorry. The words hit like a physical blow. Lyanna felt the air leave her lungs, felt the room shrink down to just her and this impossible truth. That's, she started, then stopped. My cycles are normal. I feel fine. Hormone levels can be normal even with structural damage, Corbin explained. I've run the tests 3 times to be certain. The scarring is extensive. There's no chance of conception. Darius stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. Check again. Alpha, I've checked. Check. Again. His voice carried the weight of command, the alpha power that made lesser wolves submit. Corbin bowed his head. Of course, Alpha, but the results won't change. Lyanna sat frozen as they drew more blood, ran more scans. She felt Darius's hand on her shoulder, felt his wolf reaching for hers through the bond, trying to comfort what couldn't be comforted. An hour later, Corbin returned. His expression confirmed everything. I'm sorry, he said again. Darius didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at the test results like he could change them through force of will. Lyanna found her voice. We could adopt. There are war orphans from the border skirmishes, children who need homes. For a moment, hope flickered in Darius's eyes. Then he looked at the door, where Elder Aldrich had just appeared, Vera at his side. Alpha, Aldrich said gravely, we need to talk. The office felt smaller than it had any right to. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the Montana mountains into gray ghosts. Lyanna sat on the leather chair, hands folded in her lap, while Darius stood by the window with his back to her. Elder Aldrich stood like a judge, ready to pass a sentence. Vera lingered by the door, her expression carefully blank. The Pack Council has reached a decision, Aldrich began. In light of the medical diagnosis, we cannot support this mating. Lyanna's head snapped up. You can't unmake a fated bond. No, Aldrich agreed, but the Alpha can reject it. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Darius turned slowly, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. What are you saying? Aldrich didn't flinch. You are Alpha. Your primary duty is to produce an heir to secure the bloodline. Without one, rival packs will challenge your authority. War will come. Wolves will die. So I should just reject my mate? Darius's voice was deadly quiet. Condemn her to that pain? It will hurt, Aldrich acknowledged, but the pain of one is preferable to the death of many. Vera stepped forward, placing a folder on the desk. I've been tested. My fertility is optimal. I'm beta blood, strong genetics. The council would approve our mating immediately. Lyanna felt bile rise in her throat. She looked at Darius, at the man she loved more than breathing, and saw the war raging behind his eyes. Darius, she said softly, look at me. He did, and she saw her death in his expression. You know me, she continued, desperate now. You know I'm more than just a womb. We can find another way. There is no other way. Aldrich's voice was iron. The pack needs an heir. That is non-negotiable. Vera moved closer to Darius, her hands settling on his shoulder with practiced familiarity. They had grown up together, Lyanna knew. Childhood friends. Vera had always expected to be Luna. Deck, Vera said softly, using the nickname only old friends could use. You know this is right. For everyone. Darius closed his eyes. A single tear traced down his face. When he opened them again, the man Lyanna loved was gone. Only the Alpha remained. Lyanna, he said, his voice empty of everything except duty. I, Alpha Darius Blackwood of the Silver Creek Pack, reject you as my mate and Luna. The bond shattered. Lyanna had heard about rejection. Every wolf knew the stories, but nothing prepared her for the reality of having her soul torn in half. Pain exploded in her chest, white hot and absolutely. The bond that had connected them snapped like a physical cord being cut, the severed ends turning to acid in her veins. She felt her heart literally stutter, felt her wolf howl in agony so deep it had no sound. She fell, hit the floor hard, couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except scream. Through the haze of agony, she heard Darius cry out too, heard him hit his knees. The rejection hurt both of them, but it would kill her slower. Omegas didn't survive broken mate bonds. Statistics didn't lie. When she could finally see again, Aldrich was standing over her with clinical interest. Vera was supporting a shaking Darius, whispering something in his ear. You have 1 hour to pack your belongings, Aldrich said. A rejected mate causes instability in the pack. You are hereby banished from Silver Creek territory. Lyanna tried to speak, only managed a sob. Darius still knelt on the floor, his face buried in his hands. He didn't look at her. Couldn't. It's a storm, Lyanna finally gasped. The rogues are active near the border. You're sentencing me to death. I'll provide a car and money, Darius said to the floor. Go west. Don't look back. Vera's smile was small, satisfied. I'll help her pack, Alpha. Lyanna dragged herself to her feet, every movement agony. She looked at Darius one last time, memorizing the face of the man who had promised to protect her. You'll regret this, she said, the words scraping her throat raw. Not because you lost me, but because you believed a lie. Then she ran, not to pack, not to take the car or the money. She shifted mid-stride, letting her wolf take over, and fled into the forest. Behind her, in the office, Dr. Corbin Hale slipped quietly out a side door. In his pocket, his phone vibrated with a text message. Payment transferred. Destroy all evidence. He deleted it and smiled. The blizzard had turned the world into a white nightmare. Lyanna's wolf ran blind, paws bleeding, lungs screaming. She didn't know where she was going. Didn't care. The bond wound in her chest pulsed with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of what she had lost. She should stop, should find shelter, but stopping meant feeling, and feeling meant dying. So she ran. The rogues found her at the ridge. 3 of them, feral and starving. They had the look of wolves who had been cast out so long they barely remembered being human. Matted fur, yellow eyes, teeth bared in anticipation. Lyanna's wolf snarled, backing against the cliff edge. Below 100-foot drop to jagged rocks and certain death. The bond rejection had drained her energy. She had nothing left to fight with. But she fought anyway, because dying on her feet was better than dying on her knees. The largest rogue lunged. Lyanna met him with teeth and fury, feeling her jaws clamp down on his shoulder. He howled, shaking her off. Another rogue circled, waiting for an opening. Then the third one struck low, catching her injured hind leg. Bone snapped with a sound like a gunshot. Lyanna fell, whimpering, and tasted snow mixed with her own blood. The lead rogue approached slowly, savoring his victory. He positioned himself for the killing bite to her throat. Lyanna closed her eyes, thought of Darius one last time, felt the broken bond pulse weakly. "I loved you," she whispered to the wind. "Even at the end, I loved you." The rogue's jaws opened wide. Then the sky caught fire. Blue flames erupted from nowhere, a wall of heat that turned snow to steam instantly. The rogues yelped, scrambling backward. The fire didn't burn Lyanna. It surrounded her like a shield, warm and protective. Through the flames, a shadow descended, massive, ancient, powerful beyond measure. Obsidian wings that blocked out the storm. A body covered in scales that gleamed like midnight. Eyes that glowed with an intelligence far older than the mountains themselves. The dragon landed with enough force to shake the earth. It was easily 50 feet long, every inch of it perfect, deadly grace. The rogues took one look and fled, tails between their legs, their hunger forgotten in the face of a predator that made them look like insects. The dragon turned those ancient eyes on Lyanna, studied her with curiosity. Then it began to change. Bones restructured, wings folded into a back, scales retreated into skin. In less than a minute, the dragon had become a man. He was tall, with silver hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes the color of violets. Glowing blue runes covered his bare chest, pulsing with inner light. He wore only loose pants, seemingly unbothered by the freezing temperature. He knelt beside Lyanna's broken wolf form, placed one warm hand on her side. "Interesting," he murmured in a voice like grinding stone. "You have the scent of ancient blood, old magic, sleeping." Lyanna tried to shift back to human, to ask who he was, what he wanted. But the bond wound chose that moment to pulse with fresh agony. She whimpered, feeling darkness creep in at the edges. The man noticed the wound. His expression shifted to understanding. "Rejected," he said quietly. "And recently. You should be dead already." He examined her more closely. "But you're not dying. You're changing." He lifted her as easily as a child, cradling her broken body against his furnace-warm chest. She should have been afraid, should have fought. Instead, she felt safe for the first time in hours. "My name is Theron," he said as her eyes began to close. "And you, little wolf, are far more than they told you." The last thing Lyanna saw before unconsciousness took her was her birthmark, the one she had always hidden, always dismissed as a simple skin pattern. It was glowing, brilliant gold, bright enough to light the darkness, glowing in the perfect shape of a dragon's claw. Then the world went black, and Lyanna Rivers died. What would wake up 3 days later would be something else entirely. Something the world hadn't seen in 200 years. something that would make Alpha Darius Blackwood wish he had chosen differently. But that's a story for Act 2. Lyanna woke to the smell of cedar and cinnamon, and for one blissful moment, she thought she was back in Darius's bed. Then memory crashed down like an avalanche, and she bolted upright with a gasp. Pain lanced through her chest where the bond used to be. Not the searing agony of the rejection, but a dull, persistent ache, like a tooth that had been pulled, leaving only the phantom memory of what belonged there. She was alive. That was the first shock. She was in a bed large enough to fit 6 people, covered in furs so soft they felt like water against her skin. The room around her had been carved directly from living stone, the walls smooth obsidian that seemed to absorb light. Floating orbs of blue fire hung in sconces, casting everything in an otherworldly glow. This was not Montana. This was not anywhere she recognized. Lyanna threw off the covers and immediately looked down at herself. She wore a simple linen shift, clean and white. Her body felt wrong, too light, too strong. She lifted her hands and found them unmarred. No scars from the rogue attack. No trace of the injuries that should have killed her. Her leg, the one the rogue had shattered. She swung it over the side of the bed experimentally, put weight on it. Perfect. Whole. Like it had never been broken at all. The regenerative properties of dragon blood are quite potent. Lyanna spun toward the voice. Theron stood on a balcony she hadn't noticed, his silver hair caught in a wind that shouldn't exist underground. He wore the same loose pants as before, his bare chest covered in those glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Where am I?" Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. The Ethel Guard, a sanctuary hidden from the human and wolf world for over 3 centuries. He turned to face her, and his violet eyes seemed to see straight through her. "Welcome to the last refuge of the dragon clans." Dragons, real dragons. The stories she had heard as a child, dismissed as mythology, were standing in front of her in human form. Lyanna's mind raced, trying to reconcile impossibility with the evidence of her own eyes. "You saved me from the rogues." "I triggered your awakening," Theron corrected. "You saved yourself. The blood inside you did the rest." "What blood? I'm a wolf. Just a wolf." Theron's smile was ancient and sad. "Come see." He gestured to the balcony. Lyanna stood on shaking legs and walked to join him. What she saw stole her breath. They stood on a cliff face overlooking a valley that shouldn't exist. The sky above was not blue, but a swirling nebula of purples and golds, stars visible despite what appeared to be daylight. Below, a city sprawled across the valley floor, buildings carved from crystal and stone, connected by bridges that seemed to float on nothing. Dragons moved through the air, not the massive beast Theron had been, but smaller ones, elegant, their scales catching the strange light like living gemstones. And below, figures moved through the streets, some human, some partially shifted, some in forms Lyanna had no names for. "This is impossible," she whispered. "This is sanctuary. This is survival." Theron stood beside her, hands clasped behind his back. "When the hunters came 300 years ago, when they slaughtered our kind by the thousands, the strongest of us created this pocket realm, a place between worlds where we could hide, where we could endure." Lyanna thought of the history she had learned in pack school, 300 years ago. The Great Purge. They had been taught it was a war between wolf packs, a bloody decade of territorial disputes. They had been taught lies. You're telling me dragons are real, that they've been hiding here for centuries. She turned to look at him. What does that have to do with me? Theron's expression softened. You've been asleep for 3 days. During that time, I performed some scans, medical and magical. Do you want to know what I found? Dread coiled in Lyanna's stomach. Tell me. You're not barren, Lyanna. Your uterus is perfectly healthy. The scarring that doctor showed you was a glamour, a magical illusion placed over the real image. Someone wanted you to appear infertile. The world tilted. Lyanna grabbed the balcony railing to steady herself. No. Dr. Hale is the most respected physician in the territory. He would if someone paid him enough. Theron's voice was gentle but implacable. The spell signature on the glamour is crude but effective. Wolf magic, not dragon. Someone in your pack wanted you removed. Vera. The name crystallized in Lyanna's mind with perfect clarity. Vera and her father, Elder Aldrich. They had orchestrated everything. The diagnosis, the rejection, all of it a carefully constructed lie to steal Darius from her. Rage ignited in Lyanna's chest, hot and fierce. Her hands clenched on the railing, and she felt something shift beneath her skin. When she looked down, her fingernails had lengthened into claws. Black, curved, wickedly sharp. Not wolf claws. Something else. What's happening to me? She stared at her hands in horror and fascination. Awakening. Theron placed a hand on her shoulder. The touch was warm, grounding. Your great-grandmother was not a wolf, Lyanna. Her name was Seraphine, and she was one of the Crimson Flame clan, a dragon of considerable power. Lyanna shook her head. That's impossible. I would know. The pack would know. She hid. As we all learned to hide, Theron guided her back inside, toward a table where food had been laid out. Fruits, bread, cheeses. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten in 3 days. Seraphine fell in love with a wolf during the purge. She suppressed her dragon nature, used magic to bind her true self, and lived as a wolf for 50 years. She had children, grandchildren. The dragon blood diluted with each generation, becoming dormant but never truly gone. Lyanna sat heavily in a chair, her mind struggling to process. So I'm part dragon. You were always part dragon. The trauma of the rejection, the proximity to death, it shattered the binding Seraphine placed on her bloodline. Your dragon woke up. He poured her water from a crystal pitcher. And it brought friends. Friends? Theron's smile widened. You've been unconscious, so you haven't felt them yet. But they're there. 3 distinct heartbeats, separate from your own. Lyanna froze with the water cup halfway to her lips. What are you saying? I'm saying you're pregnant, Lyanna, and not just pregnant. You're carrying triplets. The cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the stone floor. Lyanna couldn't breathe. The room spun, tilted, and refused to make sense. Pregnant. She was pregnant, with Darius's children. The children everyone said she could never have. She tried to stand, failed, and sat back down hard. The doctor lied. Theron knelt in front of her, his violet eyes kind. I can show you, if you'd like. The magical scan is more accurate than any wolf ultrasound. Numbly, Lyanna nodded. Theron placed both hands on her lower abdomen. His palms warmed, the runes on his chest glowing brighter. Lyanna felt a tingle of energy, strange but not unpleasant, spreading through her core. Then she saw them. Not with her eyes, but with some deeper sense she didn't know she possessed. 3 points of light inside her, tiny but brilliant. 3 separate souls, each with their own distinct energy signature. One burned steady and strong, like banked embers. One flickered like lightning, quick and unpredictable. One pulsed with a rhythm that felt ancient, patient, waiting. "Oh gods," Lyanna whispered. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "They're real. They're actually real. Very real. And very powerful." Theron removed his hands. "This is why the wolf doctor couldn't detect them. These children aren't just wolves, Lyanna. They're hybrids. Wolf and dragon, the first of their kind in over 2 centuries. Their magical signature cloaked them from standard medical scans. Only someone trained in dragon healing would have seen them." Lyanna pressed her hands to her stomach, feeling for the lives growing there. She couldn't sense them the way Theron could. Not yet. But knowing they existed changed everything. Darius had thrown her away for being barren, had chosen duty over love, breaking both their hearts. And all along, she had been carrying his children, the heirs he so desperately needed. The irony was a knife twisting in her chest. Does he know? The question escaped before she could stop it. "Darius, did he send anyone to look for me?" Theron's expression shifted to something like pity. "The pack believes you died in the blizzard. They found scraps of your clothing near the rogue territory, blood in the snow. Your alpha declared 3 days of mourning." 3 days. He had mourned her for 3 days and then moved on. Lyanna felt the bond scar pulse. Even broken, even rejected, part of her still reached for him. The mate instinct didn't die just because the bond did. It lingered, a phantom limb that would ache for the rest of her life. "I want to hate him," she said softly. "I should hate him. But you don't." Theron stood, giving her space. "The mate bond leaves scars, even when severed. It will hurt less with time, but it never fully heals." Lyanna wiped her eyes, forcing herself to focus. Grief could come later. Right now, she had more immediate concerns. These children, the hybrids, can I even carry them to term? I'm not a full dragon. Your dragon blood is waking up more every hour. By the time you give birth, you'll be strong enough. Theron walked to a shelf and pulled down an ancient-looking book. But there's a complication. Of course there was. What? Hybrid pregnancies require enormous amounts of magical energy to sustain. Energy that the human world simply doesn't have anymore. If you tried to return to Silver Creek to live among the wolves, the pregnancy would fail within weeks. You and the children would die. The words hit like a physical blow. Lyanna looked down at her still flat stomach, at the precious lives she had just discovered. So I have to stay here. For now, yes. Until the children are born and your powers fully stabilize. I estimate 5 years. 5 years. 5 years away from everything she knew. 5 years in a hidden city, learning to be something she had never imagined she could be. 5 years while Darius lived his life with Vera, never knowing the truth. Lyanna felt something harden in her chest. something cold and sharp that had nothing to do with dragon scales and everything to do with survival. "Then teach me," she said, meeting Theron's eyes. "If I have to stay, if I have to become something new, then I want to do it right. Teach me everything." Theron studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. "I was hoping you'd say that." They started with history. Theron led Lyanna through the winding streets of the Ethelgard, pointing out buildings and explaining their purposes. The city was smaller than it appeared from above, home to perhaps 3,000 dragons and their allies. "We are the remnants," Theron explained as they walked past a marketplace where vendors sold everything from fresh fish to enchanted jewelry. "When the purge began, we numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Now we are barely 3,000 strong. Every child born here is precious. Every hybrid, doubly so." Lyanna noticed how people stared at her as they passed, some with curiosity, some with hope, some with something that looked like hunger. "They can sense what I am," she said. It wasn't a question. "They can sense what you're becoming." The last hybrid born in the Ethelgard died 200 years ago in the final battles of the Purge. You represent something we thought was lost forever. Hope. They reached a building carved from white stone, its entrance guarded by 2 dragons in their human forms. Both bowed to Theron, then looked at Lyanna with barely concealed awe. Inside was a library that made Lyanna's breath catch. Books lined every wall, stretching up 3 stories. Some were bound in leather, some in what looked like dragon scales. Ancient scrolls sat in climate-controlled cases. The smell of paper and magic was overwhelming. Theron pulled a specific tome from a shelf and laid it on a reading table. The pages were covered in a script Lyanna couldn't read, but the illustrations were clear enough. Dragons in flight, dragons breathing fire, dragons doing battle with creatures Lyanna had no names for. "This is the Codex Draconis," Theron said reverently. "Our complete history, from the Age of Fire to the present. It will take you years to read it all, but I want you to start here." He flipped to a specific page. The illustration showed a dragon and a wolf, their forms intertwined, creating something new. Hybrid creature with wings and fangs, scales, and fur. "The prophecy of the 3, Theron read aloud. "Born of betrayal and flame, 3 who unite the divided kinds shall rise. In their veins runs the blood of earth and sky. They will shatter the old chains and bring forth the new age." Lyanna stared at the image. "You think that's about my children? I think prophecies have a way of finding their fulfillment. 3 hybrid children, born from a rejected bond and awakened dragon fire. It fits too well to be coincidence." A weight settled on Lyanna's shoulders. It was one thing to be pregnant, another entirely to be carrying prophesied children. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough?" Theron closed the book gently. "You survived rejection, Lyanna. Most wolves die within hours of having their mate bond severed. You survived 3 days in a blizzard with a broken leg, bleeding out in the snow. You survived the awakening of dormant dragon blood, a process that kills 1 in 3 even under controlled conditions." He met her eyes. "You are already stronger than you know." Lyanna wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the confidence he seemed to have in her. But all she felt was tired and scared and desperately alone. I want to see them again, she said quietly. The babies. Can you show me? Theron's expression softened. He placed his hands on her stomach again, channeling that warm energy. And there they were, 3 points of light in the darkness. Her children, her miracles. One of the lights pulsed brighter, as if responding to her attention. Lyanna felt something flood through her. Not quite thought, not quite emotion. An awareness, a connection. They can sense you, Theron whispered. Even now, this early. They know their mother. Lyanna placed her hands over Theron's, feeling the warmth, feeling the lives growing inside her. She thought of Darius holding another woman, thought of Vera in the Luna's suite, sleeping in Lyanna's bed, wearing Lyanna's crown. And she thought of coming back 5 years from now with 3 powerful hybrid children at her side. Thought of the look on Aldrich's face, on Vera's face, on Darius's face when he realized what he had thrown away. The grief in her chest transformed, hardened into something sharper, hotter, not quite hatred, not quite revenge, but close. Teach me, she said again, and this time her voice didn't shake. I don't want to just survive this, Theron. I want to thrive. I want to become so powerful that no one ever has the ability to hurt me again. Theron's smile was fierce and proud. Then we begin tomorrow. But tonight, you rest. Growing 3 hybrids takes energy, and you'll need all your strength for what's coming. As they walked back to Lyanna's chambers, she noticed the birthmark on her shoulder blade, the one she had always hidden. In the reflection of a shop window, she saw it clearly for the first time. It wasn't just a random pattern. It was a dragon, wings spread, surrounded by flames. The mark of the Crimson Flame Clan. The mark that said she had never been just a wolf. That night, alone in her enormous bed, Lyanna dreamed of fire and wings and 3 children with Darius's eyes learning to breathe lightning. When she woke, her hands were tipped with claws, and she was smiling. The first few months were hardest. Lyanna's body changed in ways pregnancy books couldn't explain. Her sense of smell sharpened until she could identify individual ingredients in meals from 3 rooms away. Her hearing became so acute she had to learn to filter out the heartbeats of everyone in nearby buildings. Her temperature ran hot enough that she stopped feeling the cold entirely. And the cravings. Dear gods, the cravings. I need meat, Lyanna announced one morning, bursting into the kitchen where Theron was calmly drinking tea. Raw meat, preferably still bleeding. Theron didn't even look up from his book. Dragon sighed. It'll pass once the babies develop their own digestive systems. When will that be? Month 5 or so? Lyanna groaned and collapsed into a chair. Her stomach, just starting to show, rumbled demandingly. This is hell. This is miracle, Theron corrected. He snapped his fingers, and a plate of raw venison appeared on the table. Eat, then we train. Training while pregnant seemed insane, but Theron insisted. You need to build strength now. The birth will be difficult and recovery will be faster if your body is conditioned. So Lyanna trained. Gentle exercises at first, stretching and breathing techniques that helped her connect with the dragon essence waking up inside her. Meditation sessions where she learned to sense the 3 distinct souls growing in her womb. She began to differentiate them. The steady one, the ember, was a boy. She could feel his presence like a warm coal, patient and strong. When she focused on him, she felt protected, safe. She named him Ash in her mind, though she told no one yet. The Lightning One was also a boy, but so different from his brother. His energy crackled and sparked, always moving, always curious. When she connected with him, her thoughts sped up, new ideas and strategies forming faster than she could process them. River, she named him, for the way he flowed and changed. The Ancient One was a girl. Her presence felt older somehow, despite being the youngest by mere minutes. When Lyanna touched her consciousness, she felt fire, not destructive, but purifying, transformative. Ember, she thought, my little flame. You're bonding with them, Theron observed during one meditation session. Lyanna sat cross-legged in a training room, her hands on her swelling belly, eyes closed. That's good. The stronger your connection now, the easier it will be to guide them later. Will they be able to shift? Lyanna asked. Like you? Full dragon form? Unknown. There's no precedent for wolf-dragon hybrids. They might shift into wolves with draconic traits. They might develop separate forms for each bloodline. Or they might create something entirely new. Theron circled her slowly. What they will have, without question, is power. Immense power. That's why training them from birth will be critical. Lyanna opened her eyes. You keep saying them like it's just the children, but I need to be trained too. Indeed. Theron stopped in front of her, which is why tomorrow we begin combat instruction. I'm 4 months pregnant, and you need to know how to defend yourself and your children. Pregnancy is not fragility, Lyanna. Your body is performing the most powerful magic in existence. It's creating life. Combat training will only strengthen you. He was right, of course. Lyanna could feel the changes accelerating. Her muscles were denser, her reflexes faster. The dragon blood was remaking her from the inside out. By month 6, she could run for miles without getting winded. By month 7, she accidentally cracked a training dummy's wooden skull with a casual punch. By month 8, she breathed smoke when she was angry. Theron watched her progress with approval and something else. Pride, maybe, or hope. You asked me once why I saved you, he said one evening as they sat on her balcony, watching the nebulous sky shift colors. Lyanna was enormous now, her belly so large she could barely see her feet. I told you it was because of your bloodline. That was true, but not complete. Lyanna shifted, trying to find a comfortable position. The babies were active tonight, all 3 of them moving and kicking. What's the rest? 300 years ago, I had a mate. Theron's voice went distant. Her name was Solara. She was Crimson Flame Clan, like your great-grandmother. When the hunters came, she was pregnant with our first child. Lyanna's hands stilled on her belly. What happened? They found our sanctuary, the one we had before this place, before we learned to hide properly. They came with silver and iron and fire of their own. Theron's hands clenched on the railing. Solara fought. She was magnificent, but she was also 8 months pregnant, and they were many. She told me to run, to save myself, to rebuild. Did you? I ran. I saved myself. I rebuilt. His voice cracked. And I've regretted it every day since. Because mates don't abandon each other, even when ordered to, even when it's logical, even when survival demands it. Lyanna reached out, placing her hand over his. His skin was furnace hot, but she didn't pull away. "That's why you train me so hard. Why you push me to be strong." "I won't fail again," Theron said fiercely. "When danger comes, and it will come, because prophecy attracts destiny, like blood attracts sharks, you will be ready. You will survive. Your children will survive. I will make certain of it." They sat in silence as the sky above them shifted from purple to gold to deep crimson. Lyanna felt the babies settle, their earlier activity fading into sleep. All except Ember, her daughter, who remained alert and watchful. "I'll be ready," Lyanna promised. "Whatever comes, I'll be ready." She didn't know how true those words would become. Labor began 3 weeks early, in the middle of the night, with a sensation like being struck by lightning. Lyanna woke with a gasp, her entire body seizing. Fluid gushed between her legs, soaking the sheets. Pain radiated from her core, sharp and insistent. "Theron!" Her voice came out as a roar, loud enough to shake the windows. He materialized in her doorway seconds later, already dressed, already moving. "It's time." "It's too early. They're not due for another 3 weeks. Dragon children choose their own birth time. They're ready." He scooped her up effortlessly, carrying her to a room she had never seen before. It was carved from white stone, with a pool in the center filled with steaming water. Runes covered every surface, glowing softly. "This is the birth chamber," Theron explained as he lowered her into the water. The heat should have been scalding, but to Lyanna's overheated skin, it felt perfect. "The runes will help channel your pain into power, will stabilize the baby's transition from womb to world." Another contraction hit, and Lyanna screamed. The water around her began to boil. Steam filled the room. "Breathe," Theron commanded. "Remember your training. Pain is just energy. You can control it." Lyanna tried. She focused on the meditation techniques, on channeling the agony into something useful. The runes on the walls flared brighter, responding to her efforts. Hours passed. The pain didn't lessen, but Lyanna learned to ride it, to work with it instead of fighting. She felt the babies moving down, felt their eagerness to be born. Ash came first, just after dawn. Theron caught him, pulling a tiny, perfect boy from between Lyanna's legs. He was silent for a moment, making Lyanna's heart stop. Then he opened his mouth and released a sound that was part cry, part roar. "Strong lungs," Theron said with a smile. He cleaned the baby quickly and placed him on Lyanna's chest. "Meet your firstborn." Lyanna looked down at her son. He was tiny, barely 6 pounds, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that were already turning gray. Darius's eyes. When he looked at her, she felt the connection they had built over 9 months solidify into something unbreakable. "Ash," she whispered. "Your name is Ash." The baby's tiny hand wrapped around her finger, and Lyanna felt her heart crack open with a love so fierce it terrified her. Then the next contraction hit. River came an hour later, quieter than his brother but no less perfect. He had lighter hair, almost brown, and eyes that shifted between amber and gold. When Theron placed him next to Ash, the two boys instinctively reached for each other, hands clasping. "Brothers," Lyanna said through tears. "They already know." Ember took longest. 3 more hours of labor. 3 hours where Lyanna's power spiked so high that the water in the pool evaporated completely, leaving her lying on steam. When her daughter finally emerged, the entire chamber filled with blue light. Ember was the smallest, barely 5 pounds, with a head full of black curls and eyes that burned gold from the moment she opened them. She didn't cry. She just looked at Lyanna with ancient awareness and smiled. "Oh," Lyanna breathed, "you're going to be trouble, aren't you?" Ember's smile widened and a tiny spark of flame danced between her fingers. Theron laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Definitely trouble, but magnificent trouble." He helped Lyanna onto a bed that had been prepared in the next room, the 3 babies swaddled and placed in her arms. She was exhausted, bleeding, her body torn in ways that would take weeks to heal. But holding her children, feeling their heartbeats against her chest, she had never felt more powerful. "They're perfect," she whispered. "They're prophecy," Theron corrected gently. "And they're yours. Whatever comes next, Lyanna, these 3 will change the world." Lyanna looked at each of her babies in turn. Ash, steady and strong. River, clever and quick. Ember, fierce and bright. She thought of Darius, of Vera, of the pack that had cast her out. "Let them come," she said softly. "Let anyone try to take what's mine. They'll learn what it means to fight a dragon." Outside, thunder rolled across the impossible sky, and in the distance, barely audible, came the sound of wings. Many wings. The dragons of the Ethelgard were celebrating. The prophecy had begun. Time moved differently in the Ethelgard. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Lyanna tracked the passage not by calendars, but by milestones. The first time Ash shifted into a tiny wolf pup with iridescent scales running down his spine. The first time River made his wooden blocks float, giggling as they orbited his head like planets. The first time Ember sneezed and accidentally set her blanket on fire. By age 2, the triplets were the size of 4-year-olds. Dragon blood accelerated their growth, their minds developing faster than their bodies could keep pace. They spoke in full sentences, asked questions that would stump philosophers, and displayed powers that made even the ancient dragons nervous. Lyanna trained alongside them. While they napped, she practiced combat with Theron. While they played, she studied the Codex Draconis, learning the history of her bloodline. While they slept, she stood on her balcony and stared toward Montana, toward a pack that thought her dead, toward a man who had chosen duty over love. The bond scar still ached. Some nights worse than others. "You're thinking about him again," Theron observed one evening. They sat in the training yard while the children practiced coordinated attacks on reinforced dummies. Ash would charge head-on, his hybrid form a perfect blend of wolf strength and dragon resilience. River would use his telekinesis to manipulate the environment, creating obstacles and opportunities. Ember provided artillery support, her blue flames hot enough to melt stone. They were 3 years old. "I don't think about him," Lyanna lied. She watched Ash execute a perfect takedown, his technique flawless. Darius would have been proud. The thought came unbidden and unwelcome. "Liar." Theron's voice held no judgment. "The mate bond leaves scars. You're allowed to feel them." Lyanna said nothing. What could she say? That sometimes she woke reaching for someone who wasn't there? That she still wore the simple silver bracelet Darius had given her on their first full moon together, hidden beneath her training bracers? That despite everything, despite the rejection and the lies and the 5 years of silence, part of her still loved him? "Mom!" Ember's shout pulled her from dark thoughts. "Did you see? I made a fireball." Indeed, a sphere of concentrated blue flame hovered above Ember's palm, perfectly controlled. The little girl beamed with pride. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Now can you make it disappear without burning anything?" Ember's face scrunched in concentration. The fireball flickered, shrank, and vanished. Only a wisp of smoke remained. "Perfect," Lyanna praised. She felt Theron's approving gaze on her. She had become a good mother, despite having no template to follow. The children were happy, healthy, powerful. Everything she had been told she could never have. "There's news from the outside world," Theron said quietly, so the children wouldn't hear. "My scouts report that Silver Creek Pack is failing. Alpha Darius has been unable to produce an heir with his new mate. The pack grows weaker by the month." Lyanna's hands clenched. "Good. Is it?" Theron's violet eyes were too knowing. "Because he's suffering doesn't mean you've healed." Before Lyanna could respond, River approached with a book almost as big as he was. "Mom, what does this word mean?" He pointed to a passage written in the old dragon tongue. Lyanna read it, translating automatically. 4 years in the Ethelgard had made her fluent. "It means transformation through fire." "Why?" "Because it's talking about us." River's amber eyes were too ancient for his 3-year-old face. "The prophecy. 3 born of betrayal and flame. That's me and Ash and Ember." Lyanna's breath caught. They had kept the prophecy from the children, thinking them too young to bear that weight. "River, where did you find that book?" "The restricted section. I wanted to know why the other dragons look at us funny." He tilted his head. "Are we special, Mom?" "You're my children. That makes you the most special beings in any world. But the prophecy says we'll shatter the old chains." "What chains?" Ash wandered over, curious about the conversation. Ember followed, as she always did when her brothers gathered. The 3 of them looked at Lyanna with identical expressions of expectation. She looked at Theron, who nodded slightly. Permission, or perhaps acknowledgement that secrets only lasted so long. "Come sit," Lyanna said. The children arranged themselves on the ground, cross-legged, attentive. She joined them, suddenly aware of how much they had grown. "There's something you should know about your father," she told them. Not everything, not the soul-crushing details of the rejection, but enough. That their father was an alpha, that he had been tricked into believing she couldn't have children, that he had sent her away, not knowing she carried them, that he thought she was dead. "So, he didn't want us?" Ash's voice was small, hurt. "He didn't know about you. There's a difference." Lyanna pulled her eldest into her lap, even though he was getting too big for it. "If he had known, I think he would have made a different choice." "But he chose wrong," Ember said flatly. "He chose the bad people over you. He chose what he thought was duty, what he thought was best for his pack." Even now, even after everything, Lyanna found herself defending him. He was wrong, but he thought he was right. River processed this with his usual eerie intelligence. If we're the prophecy, then we have to go back there eventually, to where he is. "Why do you say that?" "Because prophecies are about breaking cycles. And the cycle started there, so it has to end there too. He said it with such certainty that Lyanna felt cold despite the warm evening air. Theron spoke up. The boy's right. The prophecy speaks of uniting divided kinds. Wolf and dragon have been separate since the purge. You three, he gestured to the children, are the bridge, but bridges must touch both shores. I don't want to go back, Lyanna said fiercely. They threw us away. We don't owe them anything. We don't owe them, Ash agreed. But what about the people who didn't choose? The Omegas, the children, the ones who had no power to stop the bad things? Lyanna thought of Rena, the little girl she had protected. Rena would be 13 now. Was she still being bullied? Still suffering under Vera's cruel hierarchy? One day, she said carefully, one day, when you're older, when you're fully trained, we'll consider it. But not now. Not yet. The children accepted this. They returned to their training, but Lyanna noticed they fought with new intensity, like they were preparing for something. That night, alone in her chambers, Lyanna pulled out the one possession she had managed to keep from her old life. A photograph taken at the Autumn Moon Festival 5 years ago. Darius stood with his arm around her waist, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. They looked happy. They looked whole. She traced his face with one finger, allowing herself a moment of weakness. I hope you're suffering, she whispered. I hope it hurts every day. I hope Vera makes you miserable. But even as she said it, the bond scar pulsed, and she knew that despite everything, despite the anger and the betrayal and the years of silence, she would still bleed for him if given the chance. Some scars never healed. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a raven the size of a wolf. It landed in the courtyard while Lyanna supervised the children's sparring session. Ash was now large enough at age 5 to look like a 10-year-old, his hybrid form terrifyingly efficient. River had perfected his ability to create barriers of solidified air. Ember could maintain a continuous stream of blue fire for up to 30 seconds. They were ready for anything, except this. The raven dropped a small crystal orb at Lyanna's feet and departed without a sound. She picked it up cautiously, feeling the magic thrumming inside it. A message spell designed to play once and then dissolve. She activated it. The image that appeared was fuzzy at first, then sharpened into a wolf she vaguely recognized. Marcus, one of the Silver Creek scouts. He looked haggard, desperate. Please, the recording said, if anyone can hear this, if anyone from the old stories is real, we need help. Silver Creek is burning. A warlord named Rax has united the rogue factions. He's breached our walls. He's slaughtering everyone. Alpha Darius has been taken prisoner. They're going to execute him on the next full moon. Marcus's voice cracked. The children are dying. The Omegas are dying. We have 3 days. Please, if you ever cared about this pack, help us. The image dissolved. Lyanna stood frozen, the crystal crumbling to dust in her palm. Behind her, she heard the children stop fighting. Mom? Ash's voice. Was that about our father? She turned. All 3 children watched her with expressions too old for their faces. They had heard. Of course they had heard. Dragon hearing was exceptional. Yes, she said simply. Are we going to help? River asked. Lyanna looked at Theron, who had appeared at the edge of the courtyard. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the calculation in his eyes. This was the moment, the prophecy demanding its due. "I don't know," she admitted. "He rejected me. The pack exiled me. I don't owe them anything." "But he's our father," Ember said, "and they have children like us, little kids who didn't do anything wrong." Lyanna thought of Rena, thought of all the Omegas who had no choice, no voice, no power to change their circumstances, thought of pack children being slaughtered because of adult failures. She thought of Darius on his knees, a knife to his throat, dying without ever knowing he had children. The bond scar throbbed. "Damn it," she muttered. "Language," Ash said primly, making Theron snort. Lyanna looked at her children, at the three miracles that should never have existed. They stood together as they always did, a united front, and she saw what they would become. Not just powerful, not just prophesied, but good. They would be good because she would make them good. And good people helped those who couldn't help themselves. "Start packing," she said. "We leave in 1 hour." Ember whooped. River nodded sagely. Ash just looked at her with those gray eyes so like his father's, and smiled. Theron approached as the children ran to gather their things. "You're sure about this?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Lyanna met his gaze. "You said we were the bridge. Time to find out if the shore on the other side is worth reaching." "He hurt you. Badly." "I know." Lyanna felt the bond scar pulse in rhythm with her heart. "But I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it because those children deserve better than to die for their alpha's mistakes. And because," she paused, "because my children asked. And I won't teach them that revenge matters more than compassion." Theron's smile was proud and sad all at once. "Seraphine would have liked you." "Your mate?" "She always said the strongest power wasn't destruction. It was choosing kindness when you had every right to be cruel." He placed a hand on Lyanna's shoulder. "The vehicles are already prepared. I suspected you'd choose this path." "Presumptuous of you." "Prophetic," he corrected. Within the hour, 3 black SUVs sat idling at the gate to the Ethel Guard. Lyanna stood before them in dragon-scale leather armor, her hair now permanently streaked with crimson from 5 years of magical transformation. Her eyes had shifted too. The amber shot through with gold that caught the light like metal. She looked nothing like the Omega girl who had scrubbed floors and kept her eyes down. The children piled into the middle vehicle, arguing about seating arrangements. Theron took the lead vehicle, other dragon warriors filling out the convoy. They would arrive ready for war. As they drove through the portal that would take them from the hidden realm to Montana, Lyanna felt her heart rate increase. 5 years. 5 years since she had seen sky that wasn't purple. 5 years since she had breathed air that wasn't saturated with magic. 5 years since Darius Blackwood had looked at her and chosen duty over love. "Mom," River called from the back seat. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," she admitted. "Good," Ember said. "Uncle Theron says fear makes you sharp." "Uncle Theron is full of wisdom and also full of himself," Lyanna replied, earning giggles from all 3 children. As they crossed from one world to another, as Montana mountains replaced crystal spires, Lyanna took a deep breath and made a decision. She would save Silver Creek, would stop the massacre, would show them exactly what they had thrown away, and then, when it was over, When Darius Blackwood saw what his rejected mate had become, when he understood that she had carried his children through hell and come out stronger, she would give him a choice. The same choice he had given her 5 years ago. Accept or reject. But this time, she would be the one with the power. This time, she would be the one walking away. The SUVs roared down the mountain road toward Silver Creek, toward destiny, toward the moment when prophecy would collide with reality and everything would change. Behind them, the portal closed. Ahead of them, smoke rose from a burning pack house, and in the middle vehicle, 3 5-year-old children who looked 10 checked their weapons and prepared to show the wolf world what hybrid meant. The false victory was over. The real war was about to begin. The gates of Silver Creek exploded inward with a sound like thunder splitting stone. Twisted metal flew through the air, and one massive iron door decapitated a rogue who had been standing too close to the entrance. His body crumpled, headless, into the mud. The 3 black SUVs rolled through the smoke like shadows given form, their engines purring with predatory satisfaction. They arranged themselves in a V formation, blocking any escape, their headlights cutting through the rain and chaos like searchlights. In the courtyard, 300 wolves stood frozen. Some were Silver Creek pack members huddled together in terror. Others were rogues, 50 strong, armed with crude weapons and feral grins. And in the center, kneeling in the mud with silver chains burning his wrists, was Darius Blackwood. He looked like hell. 5 years had not been kind to the Alpha. His face was gaunt, scarred, aged beyond his 33 years. Blood matted his dark hair, and his gray eyes, once sharp as winter steel, were dull with pain and resignation. Behind him stood Rax, the rogue warlord. He was exactly as the reports had described. Massive, scarred, with one milky eye and a smile that promised violence. His knife pressed against Darius's throat, just hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. "Nobody moves," Rax bellowed to his rogues, "or I open the Alpha's throat and we feast on his corpse." The passenger door of the lead SUV opened first. Theron stepped out, and even in human form, his presence made the air itself feel heavier. His silver hair was pulled back in a severe tail, his bare chest covered in glowing blue runes. He wore a long black coat that moved like liquid shadow. He looked at the carnage with the disinterest of a god surveying insects. Then the driver's side door of the center vehicle opened. Lyanna stepped out into the rain. She had dressed for this moment with deliberate care. Black combat boots with stiletto heels that sank into the mud with each step. Dragon scale leather pants that shimmered iridescent in the dying light. A fitted tactical vest that showed off the body 5 years of brutal training had sculpted. Her dark hair, now streaked with crimson, cascaded in wild waves down her back. But it was her eyes that made the crowd gasp. Molten gold with vertical slits, they swept across the courtyard with the bored assessment of an apex predator surveying prey. She removed her sunglasses slowly, deliberately, and let them see. In the crowd, someone whispered a prayer. Another made the sign against evil. Darius lifted his head. Pain etched into every line of his face. For a moment, recognition flickered in those gray eyes. His lips parted as if to speak. Then confusion replaced recognition. This woman looked nothing like the Omega girl he had rejected. This woman looked like she could burn the world and dance in the ashes. From the SUV behind Lyanna, 3 small figures emerged. Children, dressed in matching black raincoats that made them look like tiny executioners. They lined up beside their mother, water streaming down their faces. The oldest, a boy, cracked his knuckles. The sound echoed like gunshots. The middle child, quieter, stared at the crowd with eyes that glowed faint amber. The youngest, a girl with wild dark curls, smiled. Smoke curled from her nostrils. Rax laughed, the sound wet and rasping. "Who the hell are you supposed to be? And you brought children to a massacre? Lady, you're either insane or stupid." Lyanna took 1 step forward. Her heel clicked against stone. The sound cut through the rain like a knife. "I am Lyanna Rivers of the Ethel Guard," she said, her voice amplified by magic, carrying to every corner of the courtyard. "I am the true Luna of this territory. And those aren't children. They're reckoning." She snapped her fingers. "Ember, darling, show the nice man what happens to people who threaten family." The little girl's smile widened. She shrugged off her raincoat, revealing a simple black dress beneath. Her hands began to glow with blue light that cast dancing shadows across the blood-soaked ground. "Finally," Ember chirped in a voice far too sweet for what came next. "Mommy said we could play." She opened her mouth, and hell came with her. Blue fire erupted, not the orange flames of a normal blaze, but concentrated dragon fire hot enough to melt steel. It swept across the front line of rogues like a tidal wave of destruction. They screamed, weapons superheating in their hands, eyebrows singing, fur catching fire. Pandemonium erupted. Rogues who had faced bears and rival packs, who had killed and eaten their own kind, broke ranks and ran. But there was nowhere to go. The SUVs blocked the gates. The walls were too high. And the little girl breathing fire was walking toward them with deliberate, terrifying calm. "Ash," Lyanna said, her voice cutting through chaos like a blade. "Clear the civilians." "Yes, Mom." The oldest boy didn't run. He exploded forward, his body shifting mid-stride into something that made grown wolves whimper. Not a full wolf, not a full dragon. Something in between. 7 feet tall, covered in midnight fur shot through with iridescent scales, claws like butcher knives, teeth that gleamed white in the firelight, eyes that burned the same gray as his father's, but with an inner light that was all dragon. He hit the rogue line like a wrecking ball. The first rogue he reached simply flew. Ash grabbed him by the vest and threw him 30 feet into a brick wall. The impact made a wet, crunching sound. The rogue didn't get up. 3 more rogues rushed Ash together. Bad decision. He caught one by the throat, lifted him off the ground, and used him as a club to beat the other 2 unconscious. Then he dropped all 3 in a heap and looked around for more. "River," Lyanna commanded. "Shield." "Shield," the middle child repeated. His eyes rolled back, showing only amber light. He slammed his small hands onto the wet pavement and shouted a word in the dragon tongue. The ground obeyed. Chunks of concrete and asphalt ripped themselves free, flying upward to form a semicircular barrier around the huddled Silver Creek pack members. Bullets from panicked rogues pinged off the stone harmlessly. Inside the barrier, civilians stared at the 10-year-old looking boy in shock and awe. "Nobody hurts the innocents," River said calmly. "Mom's rules." In the center of the courtyard, Rax's confident grin had transformed into something closer to terror. His rogues were being systematically destroyed by 3 children who couldn't possibly exist. He tightened his grip on Darius, the knife drawing more blood. Call them off, or I kill him right now. Lyanna stopped exactly 10 feet away. She looked at Darius with the clinical interest of someone examining a specimen. Their eyes met for the first time in 5 years. She felt the bond scar pulse, felt the phantom pain of the connection that had been severed, felt nothing else. You're threatening me with a hostage I don't particularly care about, she said, her voice ice and fire. That's poor strategy. Darius flinched. The words hit harder than Rax's fists ever could. Lyanna continued, taking another step forward. That man rejected me, threw me into a blizzard to die, chose duty and politics over the bond the moon goddess herself created. Another step. So please, tell me why I should care if you kill him. In the crowd, she saw faces she recognized. Wolves who had watched her scrub their floors, who had sneered at the Omega Luna, who had celebrated when she was cast out. Now they looked at her like she was death itself. But, Lyanna said, her voice dropping to something almost conversational, he is the biological father of my children, and nobody kills their father except me. She looked at River. Anchor. The boy's hands moved in a complex pattern. Vines erupted from the concrete beneath Rax's feet, wrapping around his ankles and calves like steel cables. The warlord yelped, trying to pull free, but the plants held him fast. What the? Rax started. Theron, Lyanna said calmly. The silver-haired dragon appeared behind Rax as if he had always been there. He placed one hand on the warlord's shoulder. His palm began to glow with inner heat. Burn, Theron said softly. Heat transferred from dragon to rogue. Rax shrieked as his shoulder pad melted into his skin, the synthetic fabric fusing with flesh. The smell of burning meat filled the air. He dropped the knife, releasing Darius, who scrambled away on hands and knees until his back hit the fountain. Lyanna walked forward and grabbed Rax by his jaw, forcing the massive man to look at her. Up close, she could see the fear in his one good eye, could smell the acrid stench of his terror. You made a mess of my home, she said quietly. You scared my children. That was a mistake. She twisted his neck. One smooth motion. The crack echoed across the sudden silence of the courtyard. Rax's body fell. The remaining rogues, seeing their leader dead and their numbers decimated by 3 impossible children and a woman who moved like violence incarnate, dropped their weapons and fled. They ran for the forest, for the mountains, for anywhere that wasn't here. Ash started to pursue, his hybrid form eager for more combat. Let them go, Lyanna commanded. They'll tell the others what happened here. Fear is a better border guard than any fence. Ash shifted back to his normal form, disappointed but obedient. He rejoined his siblings, all 3 of them barely wounded despite the carnage they had wrought. Lyanna turned to face the Silver Creek pack. 300 wolves, some injured, all terrified, all staring at her like she had descended from the stars. She let the silence stretch. Let them feel the weight of her gaze. Let them remember the Omega girl they had dismissed. Let them see what she had become. Then she spoke, her voice carrying the alpha command that came not from wolf dominance, but from dragon authority. I am Lyanna Rivers. 5 years ago, you cast me out to die. You chose politics over justice, lies over truth, cruelty over compassion. Her eyes swept across familiar faces. Today, I returned, not to beg, not to plead for acceptance, but to remind you who actually owns this land. She raised her hand, and blue fire danced across her palm. Silver Creek is under my protection now. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. Everyone else can kneel. For a moment, nobody moved. Then a young wolf, barely 16, dropped to one knee. "Luna," he whispered. Like dominoes, they fell. One by one, then in groups, then all together. 300 wolves knelt in the mud and blood, their heads bowed not to their alpha, but to the woman he had rejected. Not for Darius, for Lyanna. Darius himself still sat against the fountain, silver chains smoking on his wrists. He stared at Lyanna with an expression that cycled through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been hope before settling on devastated understanding. "Lyanna," he rasped, his voice broken from screaming. "You're alive. You're really alive." She looked at him, really looked, saw the scars, the weight of 5 years of failure, the hollow spaces where joy used to live. Part of her wanted to go to him, to touch his face, to tell him everything. The bond scar pulsed. She crushed the feeling down. "Theron," she said without taking her eyes off Darius, "remove his chains." The dragon moved forward and melted the silver with a touch. Darius rubbed his burned wrists, never breaking eye contact with Lyanna. "How?" he asked. "I sent scouts. They found your blood, your clothes. They said you were dead." "I was," Lyanna said simply. "The Omega you rejected died in that blizzard. I'm what came back." She turned away from him, from the pain in his eyes, from the bond scar that screamed at her to close the distance between them. "Get up, Alpha," she said coldly. "We have much to discuss, and your pack needs medical attention." She walked toward the ruined pack house, her children falling into step beside her, Theron a silent guardian at her back. Behind them, Darius struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on the fountain. He tried to follow, but his legs gave out. He fell to his knees again, this time not from chains but from the weight of understanding. The woman he had loved, the woman he had thrown away, the woman he had mourned for 5 years, was not only alive, but more powerful than he could have imagined. And she looked at him with eyes that held no love, only cold calculation. In the crowd of kneeling wolves, Elder Aldrich Thornwood's face had gone the color of old parchment. Beside him, Vera Sterling trembled, her perfect composure shattered. They had created this. Their lies, their manipulation, their greed. And now reckoning had arrived, wearing dragon scales and bringing fire. The Silver Creek pack house buzzed with activity. Wolves moved with purpose, repairing walls, tending wounded, cleaning blood from stone. But there was a new tension in the air, a wariness that hadn't existed before. The dragon Luna had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. Lyanna had claimed the Luna's suite, the room that should have been hers 5 years ago, the room Vera had occupied in her absence. She'd had everything of Vera's removed and burned in the courtyard, while the blonde woman watched from a cell in the dungeons. Now she stood in the center of what used to be Darius's office, studying a map of the territory. Theron stood beside her, pointing out weak points in their defenses. The children sat in the corner, playing what looked like a normal game of blocks, but was actually River teaching his siblings advanced physics through telekinesis. A knock at the door. Soft, hesitant. "Enter," Lyanna said without looking up. Darius stepped inside, and Lyanna felt the bond scar flare to life. 5 years, and it still recognized him, still reached for him despite everything. She crushed the feeling down again. It was getting easier. Darius looked better than he had 3 days ago. Someone had tended his wounds, given him clean clothes. But he moved like a man who had aged a decade in 72 hours. His eyes found the children immediately, lingering on each face with desperate hunger. "Luna," he said formally, "thank you for seeing me. You're the alpha of this territory. Technically, you don't need permission to enter rooms." Lyanna finally looked at him. "Though I notice you asked anyway. You saved my pack. That earns respect." Darius took a careful step forward. I need to. Spit it out, Alpha. I have a meeting with the council in 20 minutes. He flinched at her tone. "The children, are they?" "Mine," Lyanna said flatly. "Yes. And their father." "Do you really want me to answer that?" Darius's eyes closed. When he opened them, they were wet. "How?" "Dr. Hale said you were barren. The scans showed—" "Dr. Corbin Hale lied." Lyanna set down the map and faced him fully. "He was paid $50,000 to fake my medical results, to create a magical glamour that made a healthy womb look scarred, to tell you I could never have children when I was, in fact, already pregnant with triplets." The color drained from Darius's face. No, that's impossible. Corbin has been our pack doctor for 20 years. He's saved hundreds of lives. He would, and he did. Lyanna walked to her desk and pulled out a folder. She threw it at Darius's feet. "Those are copies of his bank records. 50,000 deposited 3 days before my diagnosis. Paid by a shell corporation that traces back to Elder Aldrich Thornwood." Darius picked up the folder with shaking hands, flipped through pages of evidence that destroyed everything he thought he knew. Aldrich. But why? What did he gain? Power, control, the preservation of pure bloodlines. Lyanna's voice dripped venom. An Omega Luna threatened his vision of pack hierarchy. So he had me removed. Vera got to be Luna. Aldrich got to maintain the status quo. And you got to suffer in a loveless mating while your true mate died in the snow. Except I didn't die, Lyanna continued. I was saved by dragons. I discovered I wasn't just a wolf, but the descendant of the Crimson Flame clan. I gave birth to 3 hybrid children who are quite possibly the most powerful beings born in 2 centuries. And I spent 5 years becoming someone who would never, ever be vulnerable again. She gestured to the children. Ash, River, Ember, come meet your father. The triplets stood and approached. Up close, the resemblance was unmistakable. Ash had Darius's gray eyes and strong jaw. River had his nose and the same thoughtful expression. Ember had his dark hair and that stubborn set to her chin. But they also had Lyanna, her resilience, her fire, her refusal to break. Hello, Ash said politely, offering his hand. I'm Ash. I'm the oldest. Darius stared at the offered hand like it might bite him. Then he dropped to his knees and pulled all 3 children into a desperate embrace. Tears streamed down his face, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I'm sorry, he choked out. I'm so sorry. I should have trusted her. Should have questioned the diagnosis. Should have chosen love over duty. I'm sorry. Ash awkwardly patted his father's back. River stood stiff and uncertain. Ember wriggled free and returned to her mother's side. He's crying, Ember whispered to Lyanna. Is he sad? Very sad, Lyanna confirmed. Her own eyes were suspiciously wet, but she blinked the moisture away. He just realized what he lost. Darius released the boys and looked up at Lyanna. Please. I know I have no right to ask. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, tell me how to fix this. Tell me what I have to do to earn even a fraction of your forgiveness. Lyanna studied him. This broken man who had once been her everything. The bond scar pulsed, urging her to comfort him, to close the distance, to rebuild what had been shattered. But she had spent 5 years learning that what was broken didn't have to be fixed. Sometimes it was better to build something new from the pieces. You want to earn forgiveness? She asked quietly. Then stand up and be the alpha this pack actually needs. Not the puppet Aldrich controlled. Not the fool who trusted liars over his own mate. The man who will fight for what's right, even when it's hard. Darius stood, wiping his eyes. I will. I swear it. Good, because in 20 minutes, the council is going to walk into that meeting room and demand I leave. They're going to call my children abominations. They're going to try to reassert control. Lyanna's eyes glowed gold. I need to know. When they attack what's mine, will you stand with them or with me? With you, Darius said without hesitation. Always with you. I failed you once. I won't make that mistake again. Words are easy, Alpha. Let's see if your actions match. 20 minutes later, the great hall filled with tension thick enough to choke on. Elder Aldrich Thornwood sat at the head of the council table, his 70 years sitting heavy on his frame, but his eyes sharp as ever. Beside him sat the other elders, all men over 60, who had controlled Silver Creek for decades. At the far end of the table, Lyanna sat with Theron standing behind her like a guardian angel carved from violence. The children played in the corner, seemingly oblivious to the political warfare about to unfold. Darius entered last, taking a seat that was technically the Alpha's position but felt more like a defendant's chair. Aldrich rapped his gavel. This emergency council session is now in order. We are here to address the irregular situation that has developed in the wake of the rogue attack. Irregular, Lyanna repeated, her tone amused. Is that what we're calling it? You returned from the dead with 3 hybrid children and claimed authority over this pack, Aldrich said coldly. That is irregular at best, treasonous at worst. Treasonous. Interesting word choice from the man who committed actual treason. Lyanna leaned back in her chair. Tell me, Elder, how much did you pay Dr. Hale to fake my medical results? The room went deathly quiet. Aldrich's expression didn't change. I have no idea what you're talking about. No? Lyanna pulled out a folder identical to the one she'd shown Darius. Bank records, Shell Corporation, money trail, all leading back to you. She slid it across the table. You orchestrated my removal because you couldn't stomach an Omega Luna. Admit it. Even if that were true, which it isn't, it would have been for the good of the pack. An Omega Luna weakens us, makes us vulnerable to challenges. And yet, I just saved your pack from total annihilation while you hid in your mansion. Lyanna's smile was all teeth. Tell me again how Omegas make packs weak. Before Aldrich could respond, he turned his attention to the children. Those creatures cannot be allowed to remain here. They're abominations. Wolves who breathe fire, who manipulate matter with their minds. They're unnatural. In the corner, Ember stopped playing. Her eyes began to glow. Careful, Theron rumbled. You're making the little one angry. I don't care what Aldrich started. Darius stood. The sound of his chair scraping back cut through Aldrich's words like a blade. Enough, Darius said, his voice carrying alpha command for the first time in years. Those children are my blood, my heirs. And if you want them, you go through me. Aldrich's eyes narrowed. You're choosing her again? After everything? She abandoned this pack for 5 years. She was cast out and left for dead, Darius roared. Because of you. Because of your lies and manipulations and obsession with bloodline purity. I did what was necessary. You destroyed my mate bond. You stole my children from me. You nearly doomed this entire pack. Darius's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. I've spent 5 years listening to you, trusting you, following your guidance, and it led us to the brink of extinction. No more. He turned to face the full council. These children are powerful, yes. Unusual, yes. But they're also the future. They represent something new, something stronger than we've ever been, and I claim them as my legitimate heirs. Aldrich's face had gone purple with rage. The council does not recognize. The council, Lyanna interrupted sweetly, doesn't have a choice. Unless you'd like my children to demonstrate exactly why arguing with dragons is a poor life decision. As if on cue, Ash shifted, not into his full hybrid form, just enough to show scales rippling along his arms. River made the council's water glasses levitate. Ember breathed a small puff of blue flame that singed Aldrich's eyebrows. Oops, Ember said, not sounding sorry at all. Hand slipped. The other council members were whispering frantically among themselves. Fear had replaced their earlier confidence. You want to study them? Lyanna stood, walking around the table toward Aldrich. Put them in some laboratory to see what makes them tick? Dissect their power? We need to understand, one elder started. You need to understand that if anyone lays a hand on my children, I will burn this pack house to the ground with you inside it. Lyanna's eyes were pure gold now, no hint of humanity left. These children are under my protection, under dragon law, which supersedes wolf pack politics. Touch them, and you start a war you cannot win. Aldrich stood, shaking with fury. This is an outrage! I will not stand for— Sit down. Theron's voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight that made the stone walls vibrate. Or I will make you sit down, and you won't like how. For the first time in his 70 years, Aldrich Thornwood sat because he was afraid. Lyanna returned to her seat. Here's what's going to happen. This pack is now under the protection of the Dragon-Wolf Alliance. I am the High Luna. Darius remains Alpha, but he answers to me on matters of security and defense. The children will be recognized as legitimate heirs and given the respect their bloodline demands. And if we refuse, another elder asked, then you leave. Peacefully, if you're smart. In pieces, if you're not. Lyanna's smile was gentle and absolutely terrifying. I'm giving you a choice, more than you gave me. The council members looked at each other, looked at Darius, who stood firm, looked at Theron, who radiated enough power to level the building, looked at the 3 children who had destroyed 50 rogues without breaking a sweat. One by one, they bowed their heads in acceptance, all except Aldrich. "This isn't over," the old man hissed. "The northern packs will hear of this. The Council of Alphas. You're declaring yourself above pack law, and there will be consequences." "Let them come," Lyanna said calmly. "I'll show them the same mercy I showed Rax. Now get out of my sight before I let Ember practice her aim." Aldrich fled, the other elders scurrying after him like rats abandoning a sinking ship. When the door closed, Lyanna allowed herself to slump slightly. The confrontation had taken more out of her than she wanted to admit. Darius approached carefully. "That was impressive. That was exhausting." Lyanna rubbed her temples. "I hate politics." "You're good at it." "I had 5 years of practice negotiating with dragons. Wolf politics seems simple by comparison." She looked at him. "You stood up for them. For us. Thank you." "I should have done it 5 years ago." Darius's voice was thick with regret. "I should have questioned the diagnosis. Should have demanded proof. Should have trusted what the bond was telling me over what some doctor claimed. Should have, could have, would have." Lyanna stood. "The past is done. All we have is forward." She started to leave, but Darius caught her hand. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, the bond scar flaring to painful life. "Please," he said, "tell me there's a chance. Tell me I haven't destroyed everything." Lyanna looked down at their joined hands. 5 years ago, this touch would have made her feel complete. Now it just made her remember everything she'd lost. She pulled away gently. "I don't know what there is between us anymore, Darius. The bond is broken. The trust is shattered. We're not the same people we were." "Then let me get to know the person you've become." His eyes were desperate. "Let me prove I can be worthy of you now." "Maybe," Lyanna said softly, "but not today. Today I have a pack to stabilize and children to protect. Romance will have to wait." She left him standing there, and if her own heart ached at the distance, well, that was her burden to bear. In the corner, River watched with ancient eyes. "Mom still loves him," he whispered to his siblings. "But she doesn't trust him," Ash replied. "Love and trust are different things," Ember said wisely. "Uncle Theron taught us that." All 3 children nodded and returned to their game, already planning how to fix their parents. The week that followed established a new rhythm. Lyanna threw herself into pack administration, fixing years of mismanagement. Darius worked alongside her, deferring to her judgment on matters he once would have decided alone. Slowly, grudgingly, they learned to be partners. The children helped. They were impossible not to love, even for wolves who initially feared them. Ash befriended the pack warriors, showing them fighting techniques that combined wolf and dragon styles. River spent hours with the healers, teaching them how to channel energy to speed recovery. Ember became the favorite of the Omega children, protecting them from bullies with a fierce loyalty only a 5-year-old dragon could muster. One afternoon, Darius found Ash in the training yard, working through combat forms with intense concentration. The boy moved like water, each strike precise and powerful. "You're good," Darius said, announcing his presence. Ash turned, and those gray eyes, so like his own, assessed him coolly. "Mom says you used to be good too, before you got soft." Darius winced. "She's not wrong. Can I join you?" Ash considered. "If you can keep up." They trained for an hour, Darius teaching traditional wolf combat while Ash showed him hybrid techniques. By the end, both were sweating and grinning. "Your mom taught you well," Darius said. "Mom and Uncle Theron. They made sure we'd never be weak." Ash wiped his forehead. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you let them trick you? Why didn't you fight harder to keep Mom?" The question hit like a physical blow. Darius sat heavily on a bench, Ash joining him. "I was afraid," Darius admitted. "Afraid of war, of pack members dying, of being seen as weak. I thought duty meant sacrifice. I thought choosing the pack over my mate was noble." He looked at his son. "I was wrong. Duty without love is just another form of cowardice." Ash processed this. "But you're fighting now. For us. Every day for the rest of my life. If your mother will let me." "She will," Ash said confidently. "She's just scared too. Scared you'll hurt her again." "I won't. I swear I won't." "Then prove it. Words are easy. Mom says actions are what count." Darius pulled his son into a hug. Ash stiffened for a moment, then relaxed into it. "I'll prove it," Darius promised, "to all of you." Similar scenes played out across the pack house, Darius helping River with a complicated physics problem. Darius teaching Ember to control her fire by making it dance in patterns. Small moments building into something that looked almost like family. Lyanna watched from a distance, her heart warring with her head. The bond scar pulsed constantly now, aware of Darius's proximity, urging her to close the distance. "You still love him," Theron observed one evening. They stood on the balcony of her suite, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I never stopped loving him. That's the problem." Lyanna sipped wine, grateful for the burn that distracted from the ache in her chest. "Love isn't enough. It wasn't enough 5 years ago, and it might not be enough now. But there's a chance. Maybe." Lyanna watched Darius below, playing with all 3 children. He was laughing, genuinely happy for the first time since she'd returned. "Maybe if he keeps proving himself. If he shows me he's changed. If he can be the partner I need, not just the mate the bond wants. He's trying. I know. That's what scares me." She finished her wine. "Because if he succeeds, if he actually becomes worthy again, then I have to decide if I'm brave enough to risk my heart a second time." Theron said nothing, just stood beside her in supportive silence. After a moment, Lyanna spoke again. "There's something else. Something I haven't told anyone." She pulled out the folder she'd been carrying. "Vera's trial is tomorrow. The pack wants her executed for treason. And you? I want her to suffer, but execution is too quick, too merciful." Lyanna's eyes glowed. "I have a better idea." The next morning, Vera was dragged from the dungeons to the Great Hall. A week in chains had destroyed her beauty. Her blonde hair was matted, her designer clothes replaced with rags. But her eyes still held defiance. The entire pack gathered to witness judgment. Lyanna sat in the Luna's chair, Darius beside her. The children sat at her feet like guardian lions. Vera Sterling Lyanna began, her voice formal. "You are charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit exile resulting in attempted murder, and treason against the pack. How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Vera spat. "I did nothing wrong. Everything I did was for the good of—" "Lying won't help you," Darius interrupted. His voice was ice. "We have Dr. Hale's confession." That got Vera's attention. "Corbin? He wouldn't—" "He did. Before he fled the territory, he confessed to everything. The payment, the fake diagnosis, the magical glamour. All of it." Darius stood. "You destroyed my mate bond. Stole 5 years from me. Nearly killed the woman I love. And the children I didn't know existed." "I gave you a choice," Vera shrieked. "I could have given you heirs. Real heirs, not these freaks." Ember stood, fire dancing along her fingertips. "What did you call us?" "Sit down, baby," Lyanna said gently. "She's not worth your fire." Ember sat, but her eyes promised future violence. Lyanna returned her attention to Vera. "The pack wants you executed. Quick, clean, merciful. But I'm not feeling merciful." "So kill me," Vera challenged. "Get it over with." "Oh no, death is too easy." Lyanna stood, descending the steps until she was face to face with the woman who had stolen her life. "You wanted to be Luna. Wanted the power, the prestige, the wealth. So I'm going to take all of it away and make you watch what you can never have again." She turned to the pack. "Vera Sterling is hereby stripped of her beta blood rights, stripped of her family name, stripped of all rank and privilege. She is Omega now, the lowest of the low. She will serve this pack doing the work she once considered beneath her. And every day she'll see my children ruling successfully. Every day she'll remember what she lost." "You can't do that," Vera screamed. "My father—" "Your father is currently scrubbing toilets in the Omega quarters," Darius said coldly. "He's lucky I didn't execute him. You're lucky I'm letting Lyanna decide your fate instead of tearing out your throat myself." Guards hauled Vera away, her screams echoing through the hall. The pack watched in grim satisfaction. Justice had been served. Lyanna returned to her seat, suddenly exhausted. The confrontation had taken everything she had. Darius reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. This time, she let him. Then the alarms began to blare. "Biological hazard," someone shouted. "Seal the vents!" Lyanna was on her feet instantly. "What's happening?" A warrior burst into the hall, his face pale. "Airborne toxin. Wolfsbane, but modified. Someone's pumping it into the ventilation system. Wolves are already collapsing." Around the hall, pack members began to cough. Foam appeared at their mouths. Bodies hit the floor, convulsing. "River! Filter!" Lyanna commanded. Her son immediately created a barrier of solidified air around the civilians, filtering the poison. But more wolves were dying in other parts of the building. "The intake is on the roof," Theron said, already moving. "But the concentration up there will be lethal, even for dragons." "Then I'll go," Lyanna said. "No." Darius was already running for the door. "I'm Alpha. This is my responsibility." "Darius, wait!" Lyanna chased after him, but he was faster. "Take care of our children," he shouted back. "And if I don't make it, tell them I loved them." He was gone, racing up the stairs towards certain death. Lyanna stood frozen, her heart shattering all over again. The bond scar burned like fire in her chest. "Mom?" Ember tugged her hand. Is Daddy going to die? Not if I can help it, Lyanna said. She ran. Lyanna burst through the roof access door just as Darius reached the intake valve. Yellow gas hung thick in the air, a poisonous fog that turned the afternoon sun sickly and pale. Below, a drone hovered, spraying concentrated wolfsbane directly into the ventilation fans. Darius had tied a wet cloth around his face, but it was useless against this concentration. Blood already streamed from his nose. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor. Every breath was agony. But he kept moving. He reached the manual override valve, a wheel rusted shut from years of disuse. His hands, slick with blood and sweat, slipped on the metal. He tried again, throwing his full weight against it. The wheel didn't budge. Come on, he snarled through gritted teeth. His vision was blurring, darkness creeping in at the edges. Come on, he thought of the pack below, of children choking on poison, of elders who had survived wars and famines dying because he was too weak to turn a single valve. He thought of Lyanna, of the way she had looked at him that morning when she let him hold her hand. Like maybe, just maybe, forgiveness was possible. He thought of Ash, River, and Ember, his children, the miracles he had never known existed until 3 days ago. They deserved better than a father who died because he couldn't turn a wheel. With a roar that tore his throat raw, Darius threw every ounce of strength he possessed into turning the valve. His muscles screamed. Something in his shoulder tore. Blood vessels burst in his eyes. The wheel moved. 1 inch. 2. 3. Metal shrieked. The valve slammed shut. The intake fans whirred to a stop. Darius collapsed, coughing blood onto the rooftop. Through failing vision, he saw the drone hovering above him. A red cross painted on its underbelly. A snake wrapped around a sword. The Venator. The Hunters. A laser sight appeared on his chest, the red dot steady despite the wind. He was too weak to move, too broken to shift. He had just enough strength to smile, knowing he had saved them, knowing the poison had stopped. Worth it, he thought. They're safe. That's worth dying for. The laser sight steadied, preparing to fire. Then Lyanna landed between him and the drone. She hadn't run up the stairs. She had jumped. 3 stories straight up, her partial dragon form giving her the strength and speed to reach him in seconds. Heat radiated from her body in waves, vaporizing the yellow gas in a 10-foot radius around them. Her eyes burned pure gold, vertical slits focused on the drone with predatory intensity. The sniper fired. Lyanna's hand moved faster than sound itself, snatching the high-caliber round from the air 3 inches from her heart. The bullet sizzled in her palm, the metal smoking from friction. She looked toward the tree line where the sniper hid, her lips pulled back from teeth that were too sharp. Too many. "River," she said, her voice carrying on the wind. "Bring me the sky." 2 stories below, River's eyes rolled back in his head. His small hands raised, fingers spread wide. The sky responded. Clouds that had been white and peaceful turned black as oil. They churned, condensed, focused into a single point directly above the forest. Lightning gathered, not the thin forks of a normal storm, but a column of pure electrical fury as thick as an ancient oak. The bolt struck with enough force to shake the mountains. Trees exploded. The earth itself cratered. The sniper's position simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant of divine wrath. The drone malfunctioned, its circuits fried by the electromagnetic pulse. It spiraled down and crashed into the courtyard below. Silence fell, broken only by Darius's labored breathing. Lyanna turned to him, and her expression shifted from vengeful goddess to terrified woman in a heartbeat. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands hovering over his body, afraid to touch in case she hurt him worse. "You idiot," she whispered. "You beautiful, stupid idiot." "Saved them," Darius managed through blood-slicked lips. "Worth it." "Don't you dare die on me, Darius Blackwood. Not now. Not when we're just starting to figure this out." Her hands began to glow with the same golden light that had healed her children during birth. Dragon fire, but controlled, channeled into healing instead of destruction. She placed her palms on his chest. Darius screamed. Dragon healing wasn't gentle. It burned away damage with purifying flame, forced broken things to knit back together, rewrote flesh at the cellular level. It was agony and salvation in equal measure. Lyanna poured everything she had into him. The magic flowed from her core through her hands into his dying body. She felt his broken ribs knit, felt his burst blood vessels seal, felt the wolfsbane burning out of his system like alcohol in fire. But something else was happening too. Her dragon blood, pure and undiluted by wolf genetics, was mixing with his, changing him, transforming him into something new. When she finally pulled back, gasping and drained, Darius's chest bore a scar in the shape of a dragon's claw directly over his heart. His skin had taken on a faint shimmer, like scales just beneath the surface. When he opened his eyes, they flashed electric blue before settling back to gray. "What?" he rasped. "What did you do to me?" "Saved you," Lyanna said. "But I changed you in the process. You're not just a wolf anymore. You're hybrid now. Part dragon." Theron appeared at the roof access, taking in the scene with ancient eyes. "Interesting. The transformation usually takes months, but desperate times create desperate solutions." "Can you stand?" Lyanna asked Darius. He tried, made it to his knees. His body felt different, stronger, like he could feel the air currents around him, could sense the heat signatures of everyone in the building below. "What happens now?" he asked. As if in answer, another explosion rocked the compound. The Venator had come in force. From the roof, Lyanna could see them flooding through the shattered gates. 50 soldiers in white tactical gear, armed with weapons that glowed with anti-magic technology. Leading them was a woman in the commander's insignia, her face twisted with zealotry. And riding in the turret of an armored personnel carrier, screaming directions, was Vera. "She escaped," Theron observed calmly, "and led them right to us." "Of course she did," Lyanna said. Fury and something like admiration warred in her chest. Vera had always been a survivor. "Can you fight?" she asked Darius. He shifted, and his wolf was magnificent, larger than before, midnight black with scales that gleamed blue steel along his spine. His claws were obsidian, and when he howled, the sound carried harmonics that no normal wolf could produce. "I can fight," he said. They descended together. The battle that followed would be spoken of in whispered legends for generations. The Dragon Luna and the hybrid Alpha, fighting side by side while their impossible children turned the tide of war. Lyanna moved through the Venator soldiers like death incarnate. She didn't need weapons. Her hands, tipped with dragon claws, were enough. She caught blades mid-swing, melted guns with a touch, moved with speed that made her seem to teleport. Darius fought beside her, his new hybrid form giving him strength beyond any normal wolf. When a soldier aimed a krypton cannon at Lyanna, Darius leaped, intercepting the blast that should have disintegrated him. Instead, his new dragon-touched body absorbed the energy, his scales glowing blue-white with stored power. He released it in a shockwave that threw 20 soldiers backward. "Nice trick," Lyanna called. "I have a good teacher," he replied. Then the children arrived. Ash crashed through a wall in his full hybrid form, roaring a challenge that made hardened soldiers drop their weapons and flee. He grabbed a jeep and used it as a club, swinging it like a toy to clear a path. River stood at the center of the courtyard, eyes glowing pure amber, and the earth obeyed him. Mud turned to quicksand, trapping 50 soldiers up to their waists. They struggled, firing wildly, but couldn't escape. Ember walked forward with the deliberate calm of a child who knows she's the most dangerous thing on the battlefield. Commander Sterling, the Venator leader, aimed her sidearm at the little girl. "Stand down, abomination!" Ember tilted her head. "I'm not an abomination. I'm a dragon." She snapped her fingers. A pillar of concentrated blue fire descended from the heavens like the wrath of an angry god. It was so hot that it turned sand to glass, so bright that soldiers 300 yards away had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, Commander Sterling was gone. Just a scorched crater remained. The surviving Venator soldiers dropped their weapons and surrendered. Silence fell across the battlefield. Vera, who had hidden during the fighting, tried to crawl away through the chaos. Darius saw her and shifted back to human form. He stepped into her path, naked and unconcerned, his new hybrid power radiating from every pore. "Going somewhere?" he asked. Vera looked up at him, at the man she had manipulated and controlled for 5 years. The fear in her eyes was absolute. "Please," she whimpered. "I was forced. The Venator threatened me. I had no choice." Lyanna walked over, her dragon-scale armor splattered with blood. She looked at Vera with clinical detachment. "Your pack," she said to Darius. "Your call." Darius looked at the woman who had stolen 5 years of his life, who had destroyed his mate Bond, who had led an army of hunters to slaughter innocents. "I exile you," he said, his voice carrying Alpha Command enhanced by dragon power. "From this pack, from this territory, from any pack that values honor. You are rogue. You are outcast. And if I ever see you on Silver Creek land again, there will be no hesitation." The words carried weight beyond their meaning. They were a binding, written into reality by the power of an Alpha's decree. Vera screamed as the pack bonds, already tenuous, shattered completely. She became truly packless in that moment, alone in a way that would drive most wolves mad within months. She fled into the forest on hands and knees, her sobs echoing. Darius watched her go, then turned to Lyanna. They were both covered in blood and ash, exhausted beyond measure, but alive. "We won," he said, sounding surprised. "We did," Lyanna agreed. Then her legs gave out. Darius caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest. The bond scar pulsed, weak but present, reaching for connection. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "I've got you." For the first time in 5 years, Lyanna let herself believe him. The autumn air carried the scent of pine and possibility. Silver Creek had been rebuilt, stronger than before. The pack house stood taller, its walls reinforced with dragon-forged steel. The territory expanded, absorbing 3 smaller packs who had petitioned to join the Dragon Wolf Alliance. In the Omega quarters, Aldrich Thornwood scrubbed floors under the watchful eye of the young pack members half his age. He had aged a decade in 6 months, his pride stripped away one degrading task at a time. But he was alive. Lyanna had given him that much. In the rogue lands beyond pack territory, Vera lived in squalor, working for a cruel rogue alpha who delighted in tormenting the former beta's daughter. She dreamed of her old life, of silk dresses and respect, and woke to cold floors and contempt. Justice, Lyanna had decided, didn't always require death. At the pack house, morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the Luna's suite. Lyanna woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of children arguing. She smiled before she even opened her eyes. "Ash took my book." Ember's voice carried from the common room. "Did not. You left it in the training yard." "Boys, stop fighting," River said with the long-suffering tone of a middle child. "Mom will hear you." "Mom's already awake," Lyanna called, pulling on a robe. "And if you've broken anything, you're fixing it yourselves." She padded into the common room to find all 3 children playing a complicated board game that seemed to involve both strategy and magic. They had grown again in the past 6 months. Ash looked 12 now, River 11, Ember 10, though they were only 5.5. Darius stood at the stove, cooking breakfast. He wore simple clothes, his hair still damp from a shower. When he heard her enter, he turned and smiled. That smile still made her heart skip. "Morning," he said, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter. "The pack wants to know if you're still coming to the council meeting." "Wouldn't miss it. Rena's joining as the new Omega representative." Lyanna sipped the coffee, perfectly prepared. "How do you always get it right?" "I pay attention." He moved closer, but didn't touch. 6 months, and he still asked permission with his eyes before closing distance. Today, Lyanna nodded. Darius wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. She fit perfectly, like they had been designed to slot together. The bond scar pulsed. Not with pain anymore, but with warmth. They weren't fully mated again. The bond couldn't be completely repaired, not after being so violently severed. But they had built something new. Something stronger because it was chosen, not just fated. "The Northern Alphas are sending ambassadors next week," Darius murmured against her hair. "They want to see the hybrids, understand the alliance. Let them come. We have nothing to hide. Some will challenge us. Let them try." Lyanna turned in his arms to face him. "We survived the Venator. We survived Aldrich's betrayal. We survived everything that tried to break us. A few posturing alphas don't scare me." Darius's eyes, still gray but now flecked with that electric blue, crinkled with amusement. "You're terrifying when you're confident." "Good. You should be terrified of me." "Oh, I am, every day." He leaned down, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was soft, gentle, full of promise. When they broke apart, all 3 children were watching with varying degrees of disgust and approval. "Gross," Ember pronounced. "Inevitable," River corrected. "Finally," Ash said, with satisfaction. Later that morning, the entire pack gathered for the full moon run. 300 wolves, plus their dragon allies, ready to celebrate the season's first snow. Lyanna stood at the front, Darius beside her, their children flanking them like guardian spirits. She looked back at the faces watching her. Pack members who had once sneered at the Omega Maid now looked at her with respect, admiration, even love. Rena, now 13 and confident, stood with the other Omegas. She caught Lyanna's eye and smiled. Some things, Lyanna thought, were worth fighting for. "Ready?" Darius asked. Lyanna shifted. Her wolf was no longer the simple gray creature of her youth. She was larger now, touched by dragon magic, her fur shot through with crimson streaks. Her eyes glowed gold, even in wolf form. Beside her, Darius shifted into his magnificent hybrid form. The children shifted too, Ash into his scaled lichen body, River and Ember into their own unique combinations of wolf and dragon. Theron, in full dragon form, took to the sky above them. Lyanna howled, and the pack answered. They ran through the forest as one, united not by blood alone, but by choice, by the decision to build something new from the ashes of the old. At a cliff overlooking the valley, Lyanna and Darius shifted back to human form. The cold didn't bother them anymore. Dragon blood ran hot. "It's beautiful," Lyanna said, looking at Silver Creek spread below them. Lights twinkled in windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life continued, stronger than before. Darius pulled her close, and this time she leaned into him completely. "Not as beautiful as you." "Smooth talker." "I've had 6 months to practice." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Lyanna, I know we're taking things slow. I know the bond can't be fully repaired, but I need you to know something." "What?" "I choose you. Every day, every hour, every moment, I choose you. Not because fate demands it, not because duty requires it, but because you're the strongest, bravest, most magnificent person I've ever known. And I would be honored, humbled, grateful beyond words if you would consider completing the bond. Not now, not until you're ready, but someday, when you trust me again." Lyanna felt tears prick her eyes. The bond scar pulsed, warm and insistent. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said. "Ask me when we've rebuilt everything we lost, when I'm absolutely certain you won't choose duty over us ever again." "I won't," Darius promised. "Never again." "Then ask me in 6 months, and I'll give you my answer." She pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like snow and promise and second chances. Below them, their children played with pack pups, teaching them tricks that combined wolf instinct with dragon power. The future of both species, learning to coexist. Theron landed beside them in human form, tactfully giving them space. "The prophecy is unfolding as written," he observed. "The three are uniting the divided kinds." "They're just children," Lyanna said. "They're hope," Theron corrected. "And hope changes everything." As the sun set over Silver Creek, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Lyanna allowed herself to believe it. Allowed herself to hope that the worst was behind them. That the future held not just survival, but joy. She had been called barren, broken, useless. She had risen from those ashes with fire and children and power enough to remake the world. And this time, she wasn't flying alone. The pack howled to the rising moon, wolf voices joined by dragon roars. Harmony, where once there had been division. Lyanna threw back her head and joined them, her voice carrying across the mountains, announcing to any who would listen. The dragon Luna had returned, and she was never leaving again.